is kind of part two, continuation from the last video where I was explaining my situation. Basically, I've ran out of money after building the house. The new job hasn't happened yet, and I'm getting kind of looking around. What's my plan? I realized at the end of making that last video, the way it was edited, I was asking for a lot, but I wasn't giving you much in return. While I was recording that video, there was a lot of footage that I cut off that I'm now releasing as part of this video, where I'm kind of outlining some projects that I would really like to do, and I hope that some of you guys would be interested in them, and that would give you kind of a incentive maybe for helping to support me so I can get these things done and tested. All right. So all of the assets that I have, with the exception of 60 acres of land, I own them. When I cashed out all of my postal money, I could have lived off of that based on my budget if I didn't drive and I didn't build the house over a year, even after paying off the land. In fact, I had enough. I could have paid off the second 20 acres and still had probably 6 months of money to live on. That was tempting, it really was, but I thought, well, I didn't plan on just sitting here being a bum. My goal was build the house, spend the money, get a job. I am 52 now. They tell me that I think minimum age is 62 for Social Security. Based on the numbers of how many hours I've worked in my career, in my life, Social Security will pay me enough of my limited budget. When I get to Social Security, I've got enough, even if I don't pay off the rest of the land now, I'll be able to make land payments, the rest of my life. And I'll be okay, because I don't have to drive to El Paso every day to go to a job. So when I hit 62, I'll take minimum security, or, whatever it ends up being. And we'll be okay. So I'm kind of just looking at this 10-year gap right here. I'm like, okay, so I just got to figure out what to do for the next 10 years. So the next 10 years, what I'm looking at, my goal is to get to $1,000 a month. Now I don't want that to take 10 years. I'd like it to be, this year would be really nice. Based on my budget, if I don't have to go into El Paso to work, $755 will keep me eating and keep the basic bills paid that I need. So I need $755. That includes food. If I get really tight, I can get a little better than that. Buy more potatoes, that kind of thing. Why would somebody want to give me money? That's a reasonable question. The way that you make money, from what I'm looking at, I've got my YouTube and I got my books. That's the two things that are already out there. All right. YouTube isn't making money yet, but when I hit the 1,000 subscribers, I'll get something. I'm not going to get rich off of that yet, but I'll get something. If somebody buys my books on Amazon, I get $2 or $3 per book. I'm not getting a lot on that either. If somebody, what would that take? If I sold 200 copies at $3 a book, rough numbers, I'd have basically my budget. I'd be pretty close. Patreon, I look at projects that I support. Some people I'm giving money to for entertainment value or because they're living a lifestyle that I wished I could live. One example is Gone with the Winds. I used to be subscribed to them, or I used to support them. I haven't been lately just because I ran out of money myself. But a young couple sailing the world on a catamaran. Beautiful boat, nice people. And that was something I thought about doing. So I thought, well, okay. By watching them, I was able to learn things. Now, some of their videos are just entertaining. Their camera work, it's up there with National Geographic and some of the stuff you'd see on the BBC. Beautiful work, beautiful locations, entertaining videos, just all around good stuff. But I'm giving them money more because of the information. So what I'm looking at is, what can I provide that somebody would think, okay, I provide value and so they choose to give me money. I don't want to be some homeless veteran that's asking for dollars on the side of the road. You know, I don't want your pity. I don't want your charity. I want to be able to do something that is worth something. All right. So some of my projects have gotten, you know, a lot of hits. Stuff like solar panels, the water system that I've done, building the house has gotten a pretty good response. Living in the school bus has gotten a lot of hits. Just, you know, the basic how I'm living. Because, you know, I've had a lot of people commenting that I'm doing something that they wish they could do or that they want to do in the future. And so by me documenting my process, that's showing some value, because you can look at the mistakes I've made or sometimes the things that have worked, and then you can learn from that and maybe make your life a little bit easier. So things like my solar system. You know, I showed a simple way that you can go to like Harbor Freight. You buy these panels, they always have them in stock. You grab a couple, you know, whip out the coupon, save a few dollars. Go over to Walmart, buy some deep cycle batteries because they're cheap and they're easily accessible. None of my stuff is the best you can buy. It's just the easiest to find. There is much better solar panels, but they aren't usually stocked in the store. You have to figure out how to get them. Some of the stuff I get comes from Amazon. Some of it's a crapshoot. Some of it doesn't work, you know. But what I'm looking at in the future, so I was talking about the next 10 years. What I'm looking at, I've got 10 years between now and Social Security. I'm looking to make income mostly between YouTube and the books and Patreon. Okay. So what can I do that would be interesting enough for most people to be, you know, one, to watch it? Because if you get 1 million hits on YouTube, you're going to be doing okay. However, until you get to 1 million hits, you're not making any money, not any real money, right? But there are people with very low YouTube numbers that are still making a living through Patreon because they're able to do something that people enjoy enough that they're willing to pay money for. Okay. So the project that I'm looking at next here on the ranch after I finish the house is doing wind power. When I first moved out here, in fact, when I first came out here, I camped on the property a few times, and I got really excited because the wind is ferocious out here some days. Some days it doesn't blow at all, but quite often, probably, I'll bet 2 to 3 days a week, you would have enough wind energy that you could get through the quiet days of the week. I'll just say it that way. So if you had a big enough generator and big enough battery bank, if you got 2 or 3 good days of wind, you could probably make it through the not very windy days. And then you've got solar, and you've got the generator for backup power. You can't really rely on any one thing. For example, right now, we're in monsoon season. The last 2 days have been pretty cloudy in the morning. I got 0 solar. You know, but it's been really windy, so I'm like, man, if I had wind, I'd be set, you know. So did some research, and this book comes up a lot. Homebrew Wind Power, Dan Bartman, Dan Fink. This is available on Amazon. I don't have an affiliate link. I don't have an affiliate program with Amazon at the moment. Hands-on guide to harnessing the wind. The book is about 320 pages long. Well written, very detailed. Drawings and graphs and charts and tips and tricks. You know, just follow the steps and build your windmill. You know, it's really, really well written. They got broken down on, you know, building towers. You actually build your own generator. You buy magnets. They show you how to hand wind the wires to make your generator. You know, it's really an amazing book. So very likely that's what I'm going to do. I don't like any of the wind generators I've seen that you can buy. My neighbors have a couple of them. I've seen one of them not working lately. You know, none of the reviews that I've read on, you know, the 400 watt made in China wind turbines are any good. They don't last. Where these guys really excelled was because you built it yourself. You know how to do the maintenance. You know how to replace things. You know, when they wear out, bearings eventually wear out. That's what they do. So because you built the thing in the first place, you have an idea how to build it. Okay. So that's the biggest project I'm planning for the next year. Water catchment is big out here. It seems simple, you know, and wind turbines are simple. You just go buy them and put them on a tower and you're done, right? I'm in the desert and I got to drive 15 miles to get drinking water and water for laundry and showers. When it rains, yesterday we didn't get a very big rain and I still got about 40 gallons of water. Okay. If nothing else, that's enough to water my potatoes for the next week or two. Okay, I'm growing a few hills of potatoes. The expensive things that, you know, you look at water catchment, it's like, okay, rain gutters are cheap. That makes sense. The tanks are expensive. On the low end, it'll cost you, you know, if you figure $1 a gallon, and that works up to about 300 or 400 gallons or so. Then it gets cheaper. So on the low end, I was just getting trash cans, and I'm still using trash cans to catch rainwater. I'm not drinking that water, but it's good for everything else. Okay. So you buy a 32-gallon trash can at the Home Depot, you get the good one. It'll cost you about $30, $35. So 30 gallons, $30, right in that range. When you get up to about 500, it gets closer to about 50 cents a gallon. So 1,500 gallons. That's at places like the Tractor Supply. It's an agricultural type of a store. That's where I got 2 of my water tanks from. They usually keep something in stock. You can go there, get it in the back of your truck, bring it home, put it to work right away. I was totally going to buy one of those this year because I had all that money from cashing out my retirement program. But I was really thinking I was going to get this tank because, you know, now when it's raining, I could get all that water to go in the tank, and I could go a few months then where I wouldn't have to go haul water. One of the projects that I've wanted to do for a while, draw the water. Hey, look at that, I am an artist. I've seen some projects on this. There was a really neat video of some people, I'm pretty sure we're in Cambodia, like a little mission project. They went out and taught the locals how to make a water tank with a simple process called ferro cement, which it's a neat process because instead of making a normal concrete rebar mold tank, you know, so you mold it, then you pour it in, then you take the molds out. What they were doing, ferro cement, is you take things like rebar again and chicken wire and you make a mesh. And then you have more of a mortar mix instead of concrete, and you form the mortar mix around the ferro, the steel. Okay. And by hand forming it or using trowels, but it's all manual labor. You're sitting there just scooping it up one scoop at a time, squishing it in, and then smoothing it from both sides. So you'd have one guy inside the tank and one guy outside the tank. And they just keep working it around in layers. And you build up the tank, and in the end, you have a tank that you made for relatively little money, and it holds water. Okay. And if it leaks, you just mix up a little bit of paste out of concrete and you fill in the crack, and it's supposed to seal. So I was pretty excited about that. Still am. So one of the projects that I sometimes point out is I dug a hole in the ground that when it's finished, it should hold somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 gallons of water. Okay. So somewhere more than this tank. And I suspect it's going to cost a whole lot less than $700 to build it. But I haven't finished it yet, so I can't really talk much about it. But what I'm hoping, this year we'll get the wind turbine built, and then next year, before next monsoon, we'll work on the water system more. And some of that will be water tanks that we're going to build. What I'm looking to do is take that video, if I ever find it again, I'll link it. I downloaded it one time and I watch it sometimes, but I don't remember the original link or the people that produced it. So if I can find it, I'll definitely link it for you guys. If you can make your own water tank out of simple materials and catch rainwater with it, that's the dream, right? So again, this comes, not so much entertainment, but information. If I can show you guys how I'm making this stuff work, to me, feels like I'm creating some value. A lot of these videos lately, I've been doing the updates because I haven't had time to do proper videos because I'm building a house. All right. So that's kind of the goal. This next year, if I can get this done 2019, 2020, also greenhouse. I'm not really a big fan of growing things until you realize that maybe you could eat for free. Then it gets kind of exciting. So I'm hoping next year to do the greenhouse. The potatoes that I talk about were just kind of on a lark. I just thought, well, we used to grow potatoes on the farm as a kid. I had no idea they would grow out here. Now I haven't harvested anything yet, but the greens on top are looking pretty promising. Until lately, the heat is just killing them. Giving them more than a gallon each. That's where all the rainwater is going lately. Any water I catch, I'm just putting on the potatoes. They need shade more than anything, so it's kind of the opposite of greenhouse. Greenhouse, you're trying to make it hot. So I need to figure out, when I go down that path of designing the greenhouse, some of it's going to be warming it up in the cold part of the year, and some of it is cooling it in the hot part of the year. So I'll figure out how to cool it. There was talk about the geothermal earth pipes. I've kind of pulled back on that. I'm going to say not, because the soil here is enormously hard to dig in, and you got to get down probably about 10 feet deep for it to be useful. That requires renting not the smallest backhoe, but the next bigger or the next bigger backhoe to have enough power to dig to do that. Okay. That gets pretty expensive, and I definitely don't got the budget for that, so that's out. However, there was something else that came out of that idea. So I'm going to call it thermal mass HVAC. All right. And I think this makes a lot more sense than the earth pipes did. Lines that aren't on camera. Okay, so instead of having to dig about 300 feet long and 10 feet deep, let me back up a second. Earth pipes. On the earth pipes, what you're doing is pumping air or water through a long pipe that's buried underground. And the idea is at a certain depth, the earth temperature stays stabilized at around 50 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit year round. So all you have to do is pump a loop of water or air through a long pipe, and the air or water coming out the other end will be stabilized at the same temperature as the earth. It's a wonderful idea. If you had access to a cheap backhoe, it's a no-brainer. There's people that are doing it, and it is working very well, and it would work pretty much anywhere. And the idea is, if it's let's say it's 0 degrees where you're living in the winter, all right? And if it's at 0 degrees and the ground is at 50 degrees, that's going to feel pretty warm. I grew up in Canada, and we had minus 60 degree temperatures. If it ever got up, like sometimes you'd get a brief warm up where all of a sudden the snow would melt for a day and then it would get cold again. When it got up to 32 degrees, that felt so warm you'd put on shorts and run outside because it had been 60 below 2 days before. We called that the Chinook. Happened a few times a year, and then it would get cold again. So you'd run outside and be an idiot for a couple days, and then it would get cold again. So if it's really cold, 50 degrees feels pretty warm. So you could pump 50 degree air or water into your house and it would warm you up. And then you only have to warm up from 50 to 60 or 65. That's a whole lot easier. It takes less fuel or less electricity to warm up. Same in the summer. When it's like here, 100, 105, my digital thermometer, sometime in the last couple of weeks, recorded 109 degrees in the school bus. Okay. Let's say it was over 100. Okay. If I could blow air into the school bus, or now into the house, that was 50 degrees instead of 100 degrees, that's going to feel like frostbite. That's going to be wonderful. Okay. So you can live comfortably at 50 degrees once you get used to it. That's pretty good. Well, what I was starting to figure out was this was going to be enormously expensive to make that, 300 foot long, 10 foot deep trench, especially in the soil here. But the idea of geomass, geothermal, probably more geomass is the better way to say it. I've seen different names. This is probably the more correct, geothermal mass, because geothermal heating is using geysers. Okay, that's not what we're talking about. You have to go a lot deeper for that. Well, then I saw a video of Mr. Paz. I can't remember his exact name, but David Paz, I think, P-O-Z. He had an idea where he was using the sun to heat up water. The water was going into a tank. That hot tank was then used to heat up a separate loop of water that his shower ran from. And he called it thermal mass storage. And he did all the breakdown of how many gallons of water, how many BTUs, and then he looked at his hot water heater and figured out how many BTUs it used, and he was able to scale a system that if he had 2 cloudy days, he could still generate enough hot water stored in a tank to then heat up water for a usable shower for 2 or 3 days later. Okay. So when I showed earlier, I had some videos where I took black pipe, made coils, and then with the pump, it comes from the coil into a tank, and then it comes out of the tank, goes back to the coil, and then inside the tank is another coil that from my water storage tank that I take for my shower, I've got a pump. Comes to the pump and goes into the coil, comes back out as hot water, and then also from the pump it comes out as cold water. Okay. Now granted, it's summertime, it's 100 degrees anyway, but the water coming out of the hot side of my system, and I've got this working now, the water coming out of the hot side is significantly warmer than the water coming directly out of this tank. This tank is sitting on top of the ground. It's got a tarp wrapped around it, but it's not insulated. So the water in this tank is much cooler than the water coming through this heating loop. Okay, if you've ever left a garden hose on the ground, you've seen how well this can work. Okay. So what I was realizing, this water that's not getting the sun shining on it is pretty much at the average temperature between day and night. So let's say it's 100 degrees in the day, 70 overnight is pretty much what we're seeing right now. 85. I was almost there. Okay. This is why I use a whiteboard a lot. I can erase the numbers. 170. I could have looked at that and figured it out, but divide that by 2 is 85. So the difference between the hot and the cold is 85 degrees. Okay, so that's the average between the two. Well, in the morning it's almost cool. There's been a couple days where the first thing I do when I get out of bed is I at least grab a t-shirt to put on, or a sweatshirt if it's really cold. But at 70 degrees I don't usually look for a sweatshirt. When it's 100 degrees, that's pretty hot. Okay. It's hard for your body to adjust 30 degrees in a day and then go back again. By morning when I'm in bed, I've got the covers pulled up even though it's 70 degrees because I'm used to over 100 degrees in the daytime. All right. What I have found This water in the tank, I haven't measured it. I should do that because I've got a digital thermometer. This water, if I take a cold shower from here straight to my shower head, it feels cold. It's not cold. It's got to be somewhere between 70 and 100. So I'm thinking it's probably close to 85 degrees, but if it's 100 degrees in the bus when I take a shower, water has a much higher BTU rating than air. So the air hitting your skin isn't cooling you down, but if you had the same temperature of water hitting your skin, you'd feel it more. I mean, think about it. You jump in a swimming pool. That swimming pool has been equalized with temperature with the air, but overnight it cools down. Okay, so this is kind of the trick. Okay, so where I'm going with all this, what I'm thinking is, as a worthwhile project, after we get wind power and we build water tanks and probably the greenhouse, I'm going to come back to this because the water temperature will be at the average between day and night temperature. It just makes sense. It takes it a while to warm up the water. By then the sun goes down and the water starts to cool down again. But the temperature will always be a couple, 3 hours behind the air temperature. So when it's 100 degrees in the daytime in the air, the water is cooler. And then overnight, the water will be behind it again, and so the water will be warmer than the air. So if you were cold, you could maybe heat up by using the energy stored in that tank of water. So the first thing in the morning, if you feel kind of cold, the water in your storage tank might be warmer than the air, and maybe you could use that to heat you up. Okay. Now, what I'm looking at is, what about if we had two systems? This system for the water heater and this system as a cooler, like a reservoir of cooler water. By pulling water from one tank or the other, this one is quite warm. I can take a hot shower from it. This one is much cooler. I could probably use this water blowing through a heat exchanger to cool down the house in the heat of the summer. Now, there's nothing for free, so you have to at least run a water pump and an electric fan to blow air through it. But if you think about your car, your engine is generating heat, so much heat that they needed a radiator to get rid of it. But you're also able to run a little heater inside the car off of the heater core, which is pulling hot water from the engine. Okay, so that's all we're going to do. I've got the heater core and the radiator from the bus that I could experiment with. I just haven't had time because I'm building the house. But the water in this tank, this is only about a 275 gallon tank. Because this always feels cool, that's a starting point. Okay, so if I could pump this water through the radiator and have the fan blow the air onto me, it would be blowing air through the radiator. The air coming out would be colder. Not cold, because we're not doing air conditioning, but cold water will cool down air. That just makes sense, right? Now I suspect this is going to need a very large tank, because I don't want to waste this water because I live in the desert. So I'm going to be taking this water and sending it back to here and recirculating it. But if in the evening, say if I do this for 2 or 3 hours, okay, if I've got 5 or 10,000 gallons, the air in my house won't heat that up very much. And then it's got all night to cool off until the next day, and then I do it again. So this is my thermal mass. So I can use the sun to heat up one coil for my shower, and just the average temperature between hot and cold should be able to cool me down in the heat of the summer. Now the same idea, we take the heater side of this and we run it to the house, run it through the radiator in the winter. If the sun shines on something black, I've seen black asphalt melt snow. in Canada. So even though it's cold, the sun is shining on the black asphalt and the snow is melting. So I remember, my dad was always like, yeah, get out first thing in the morning, sweep the sidewalks and shovel the snow, because then by the evening, the sun has had time to heat that up to enough to melt what was left of it. So you get out there and knock most of the snow off, and the sun would sometimes melt it. So if we use the same idea, the sun shining on the black pipes. Now here in Texas, the coldest I've seen was about 20 degrees, so just below freezing. My water froze up a couple times. When it's above 30 degrees, no, let me think. At about 40 degrees, I would turn off my propane heater in the bus. Okay. Bus wasn't well insulated. So I had a little propane heater, and it was pretty inexpensive to run it. I didn't feel bad about it too much. So I thought, okay, if I could make this work where the sun shines on this all day, goes into a tank and sits there, and then in the evening until the next morning when it's cold, if I could have a little pump pumping water from this hot tank of stored hot water down into my radiator, my heater core, and then a little computer fan or something like that to blow some air through it. If I can keep it above 40 degrees, for me, I was okay, right? And if it's 20 degrees outside, and then say if it's got up to 50 in the daytime, so that's about 35 average. I only got to get it up about 5 degrees to where I don't have to run the propane heater anymore. Okay, so that's kind of the way I'm looking at it, is if this water could be averaged out to a temperature above freezing, one, it wouldn't freeze, okay? This water never froze. It was the water at the pump that froze. This was still liquid because it had so much thermal mass, it wouldn't freeze. It was just too much. The air temperature couldn't cool it down overnight. First thing in the morning, yeah, my water was froze at the pump. But by the next evening, it was done. It had melted, and then it never froze again that year. So it doesn't get that cold. Now, when I lived in Canada where it was minus 60, yeah, this probably wouldn't work out too good. Although, lakes don't always freeze because they have so much mass. All right. Now, they did where we lived. You could drive your truck across the lake. You've probably heard of ice road trucking. They drive semis across the frozen parts of the ocean. Yeah, that's pretty cold. What I'm looking at, my numbers, if I get the job, great, I'll take it, right? But in the meantime, I'm looking at the money that I had went into the house. I'm looking to kind of make that gap up again until I get things going. Now, when is that going to be? You never really know. The 1,000 subscribers, we're close to that. It could be a month or two. Okay. Now, I'm not going to make a lot of money from that short term. So, there you go. But some of the ideas that I was talking about, if you saw any value in any of this, this is when it would be really great if about, a few hundred of you guys chipped in $1. And that's really what I'm looking at is, I would feel uncomfortable if one guy sends me $300, right? That's not the goal. The goal would be if there was a saying I read one time. I believe it was Bob Proctor, but I think he was quoting somebody else. And I talked about this on Tin Cup, the video I talked about before. What do you deserve, right? If you sit, in your house and you're just a bum, you don't deserve very much. If you create value in the marketplace, what you deserve is somewhat equated to how many people you serve. So deserve, serve, okay. So my goal is to create interesting projects that people will be inspired by, motivated by, you'll learn something, maybe you can create your own. I'd love, there's a lot of people on YouTube that I watch, and some of them I support through Patreon as much as I can, that they're creating something that I'm very interested in. And so by them going through the process of going through the mistakes and the process of learning, I look at what they've created and I'm like, okay, I like that. I'm going to go make one like it. Okay, I talked about David Paz and his thermal mass water heating. That's where I based my system from. I'm just looking at it as I can take it to the next step. I called it HVAC, heating, vent, air conditioning. All right. What if you could take that system to the next step and heat and cool your house and your hot water using a combination of solar heating, but just the mass of the water to regulate your air temperature, right? And I think it'll work. I mean, if you think about the heater in your car, it's this little tiny heater, but the water is so hot coming out of your engine, it's over boiling. If you pop the cap, it'll boil over. So it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 220 degrees and up. That little block of heater can heat your car at minus 40 below. Because I've lived through that, it works. Okay. But if you had a bigger block, like the radiator itself, if you put the radiator from a car in your house and you ran cool water or warm water through it, and then just take like a box fan and blow air through that, that would heat or cool your house. Now, is that practical for most people? No, you'll just go buy a little electric heater or a propane heater or a window-mounted air conditioner. But when you're off-grid, I'm not going to run my generator 8 hours overnight just to run the air conditioner when it's too hot to sleep. So I'm looking at stuff like this because the water in this storage tank doesn't get used. It just sits there. The water in this tank is where the shower comes from. It just goes through that, gets heated, and comes back out again. So I got 300 gallons of water that just is sitting there, probably growing some pretty neat algae by now. I should check that out. Stay tuned next week. We'll see what that looks like. Almost all of the videos that I've released in the last 6 months will get 100 people watching them very consistently. Some of them are up to 150, and then I quit looking because I just look at the page where it says, okay, this video got this many hits. And you see about the top 5 or so on. But I've got some videos that have gotten over 20,000 views. The ones where I built the camper shells have done really well. The Harbor Freight solar panels have done really well. Okay. So what I'm looking at, I only need $1,000 a month. That's not very much. I mean, it's a lot when you don't have it. But if you look at how many people are watching my videos, right? And if I release 4 or 5 videos a month, if I got $1 from everybody that watched the video, we'd be here in no time. That'd be great. Now I know that's not realistic, and what I'm seeing, there's a number. I've seen it a few different ways, but it's ringing true on the numbers I'm seeing on my page. You'll get probably 1,000 people will watch your video for every one that subscribes, somewhere in that neighborhood. And then of the subscribers, you might only get one that pays Patreon, right? And that we're almost close there because I got $1 on Patreon and I got 840 subscribers. So I need to work on that part of it a little bit. There's a few things that people can do for free though. And I think that's the biggest thing. Yeah, it'd be great if somebody wants to give me money on Patreon or other ways. That's awesome. But there's the other way. It's just simply subscribing, and I'm going to quit beating that dead horse, but it doesn't cost you anything. And I guess the other part of it is I do really appreciate the people that have subscribed, and I definitely appreciate the people that take the time to like and comment and subscribe, and it's the interaction. It's interesting when I started to understand that, because if somebody takes the time to ask a question of me on the video or make a comment, YouTube, since YouTube is owned by Google, they notice that there's interaction there. And I don't know the exact numbers, it doesn't really matter. But engagement is huge on the internet now. Anyway, I do value your comments and your feedback, so somewhere in the comments, if you go ahead and post, if you got any questions about what I'm doing, that's cool. If you're interested at all in what I talked about, Mars Clipper, I will be talking more about that in the next month. If you're interested in that, definitely let me know. I'm a little bit concerned because everybody who's followed me up until now is dealing with this kind of stuff. And if I start throwing spaceships and robots at you, I hope I don't lose a lot of people over that. What I will do soon is to split Mars Clipper off to its own channel. I've actually got a channel called Mars Clipper. It has one video and I think 4 hits on it. So there's not much going on there yet because I've been focused on this 1000, which is just above the screen. You get the idea. There's a 1000 up there. Yeah, hard to tell I was a professional videographer at one time. Anyway, I've been focusing on the 1000 for the ranch videos. But once I've got that, then I'm going to spend more time with Mars Clipper. And I won't bore you with the details of that if you're not interested. But if you are, it'd be awesome if you guys would check out the other channel. So when I get a little closer on that, I'll publish that and make it known. I was hoping this wouldn't be a long, epic video. I apologize for anybody who's watched all the way to the end. Well, that's about it. Thank you so much for watching. Yeah, that should work. Cool. I do things differently. Oh, and please, if you like any of this, it would be really awesome if you could subscribe and click that notify bell. Drop a comment if you have any questions or ideas. Share, like, comment, subscribe, notify. Oh, and Patreon if you're really an awesome kind of person. Thank you so much for watching.